Okay, let's dive into this. If you've ever read the story of how King Solomon came to power in Israel, you might have scratched your head a little, because depending on which book of the Bible you're in, you get two very different stories. It's this fantastic biblical puzzle, and figuring it out reveals a much bigger, much more profound idea than you might expect.
So, on one hand, you've got the Book of Kings, and it gives us all the juicy, dramatic details. I mean, it's basically a political thriller. You've got Solomon's older brother, Adonijah, trying to stage a coup. There's all this palace intrigue, secret plots, and just a whole lot of human messiness. But then you flip over to the Book of Chronicles, and it's like a completely different world. The whole transition is smooth, it's orderly, it's public, and it's presented as the clear, undisputed will of God right from the very start.
And that, of course, leads to the big question. So which one is it? Which story is the true one? Did the author of Chronicles just decide to clean things up? Erase the messy family drama for a happier version of history? Well, as it turns out, the answer is way more interesting than just picking a side. To really solve this, we have to understand what the writer of Chronicles, the chronicler, was actually trying to do. He wasn't just rewriting history, he was reframing it. He wanted to shine a spotlight on this massive, overarching idea. He wasn't ignoring the mess, he was trying to get us to focus on what God was doing through all of that mess.
And that big idea is this: the kingdom of God. See, the chronicler's main point is that David and Solomon weren't just building another earthly empire that would rise and fall like all the others. No, they were stewards of something so much bigger, an eternal kingdom that actually belongs to God.
And David makes this crystal clear in his last words to Solomon. Just look at this charge. He's basically saying, "Son, listen up and get this straight. This throne, it's not yours. You have been chosen to rule in a kingdom that belongs to God, a kingdom that's going to last forever. This one idea sets the stage for everything else." Now, this wasn't just a nice little pep talk. This whole concept of God's kingdom being bigger and more permanent than any earthly power was a really radical and deeply important idea, not just for Solomon, but for the people who'd be reading this story centuries later.
And the theological blueprint for this way of thinking? Well, it's laid out perfectly in Psalm 2. You could almost say the chronicler uses this psalm as the special lens through which we're supposed to view the entire story of David and Solomon.
The psalm kicks off with this big rhetorical question. It's looking at all the powerful nations of the world raging and plotting and thinking they're the ones in charge, and it basically asks, why are you even bothering? All your plans are just a vain thing. They're empty.
And then, boom, we get this huge shift in perspective. From God's point of view, sitting in the heavens, all the scheming and power-grabbing of the world's greatest empires, it's almost laughable. He holds them in derision because he sees them for what they really are, temporary and totally insignificant compared to his eternal plan.
And this is the psalm's final mic drop moment. God's response is simple and clear. While all of you were busy making your own plans, I have already installed my king on my holy hill. The outcome is not and never was in doubt. God's king and his kingdom will win. And that is the reality the chronicler wants us to see in Solomon's story.
Okay, so if Solomon isn't supposed to be just another power-hungry emperor, what in the world was his job description? What was he actually meant to do in this huge divine kingdom?
Well, unlike the great emperors of Egypt or Mesopotamia who built their legacies through war and conquest, Solomon's role was completely different. He wasn't supposed to be a conqueror. His number one mission wasn't about gaining more territory. It was about building a house for God, the temple, and faithfully representing a kingdom that was already his.
David makes his son's task incredibly simple. He pretty much hands everything to Solomon on a silver platter. He says, okay, look, number 1, here's the divine blueprint for the temple. Number 2, here are all the materials you could ever possibly need. And number 3, your job is just one thing: build it. Just follow the instructions.
The theologian Dr. August Konkel uses this perfect analogy. He says it's like getting one of those flat-pack pieces of furniture to assemble. You know that temptation, right? You dump all the pieces on the floor and think, yeah, I know better. I don't need these instructions. But David is warning Solomon right from the start. Don't do that. You are not smart enough to ignore these instructions.
So the whole point, the crucial takeaway is this: Solomon's success, his blessing, his entire legacy, it was all tied directly to his ability to be faithful to the plan he was given. His job was obedience and execution, not innovation and conquest.
So, why did the chronicler go to all this trouble to reframe Solomon's story this way? Well, it's because he was writing to a very specific audience that was in desperate need of this message. And, as you'll see, it echoes right down to us today.
You have to put yourself in the shoes of the people he was writing to. These were the Jewish people after their exile. Their beautiful temple was gone, destroyed. Their independent nation was a thing of the past. Now they were just living as this tiny little province, totally under the thumb of the massive Persian Empire. It would have been so easy for them to feel defeated, insignificant, like their story was over.
And this is the chronicler's incredibly powerful message to them. He's saying, you're looking at this all wrong. God's ultimate plan was never for you to just be another political state. His plan was for you to be a nation that represents his eternal kingdom. Your real identity isn't tied to borders or armies. It's tied to your king.
And you know what? History has absolutely proven the chronicler right. That mighty Persian Empire that seemed so unstoppable to his audience, it's gone. The Greeks who came after them, gone. The Romans, they're gone too. All the great military powers that rage and plot, eventually they all just pass away.
And that leaves us with this final really provocative thought. The story of Solomon, told through the chronicler's eyes, is a reminder that the powerful nations and empires of our own time, well, they're just as temporary as all the ones that came before. The real story, the one that actually endures, is about a different kind of kingdom. And the question is, do we see ourselves as belonging to it?